Hey everybody, it's Allie Edwards, and today's episode of Storytime, where we talk about storytelling topics related to memory keeping. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about two specific things. One is, where do I find inspiration for telling my stories? And number two, do I have any books that I can recommend related to storytelling? And I've pulled a couple out of my collection to share with you today. Let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so when I recently requested some questions from you guys related to storytelling, a few people had the same question, which was, where do you find inspiration when telling your stories? Where do you find inspiration? And then prompts for when inspiration is missing. I think this is such an interesting question because it's one that I've gotten over the years, and I feel like my answers over the years have been different. If I look back in time and I think about where did I used to find inspiration versus where I find inspiration today, some of it is different based on really like the way that the internet works now compared to when I first started scrapbooking. I would have found inspiration in different places. But one of the things that has stayed the same over the many years of my memory keeping adventures is that I look for inspiration in my own life rather than looking at outside sources for inspiration. I know it to be true that just simply being alive and living gives us sources of inspiration, right? Gives us stories to tell. If we are alive, we have stories to tell. And I think for me, what I've learned over the years is to ride the waves. So sometimes I have lots of stories to tell and sometimes I have fewer. And I'm just really trying to ride that wave. And so when I feel like doing a lot of writing, when I feel like I have lots of stories to tell, I try to write those down. Usually it's just on a document on my computer. I use Evernote often for that simple and easy program that goes from my phone to my iPad to my computer. But really it's looking for inspiration in my life. And for me, that is often watching my kids, right? Looking at and being observant. What are they into? What things are bringing them joy? What are they struggling with? I'm looking for the stories that are happening in our lives. That is the jumping off point for me. And I also do that for myself too. So if you're somebody that doesn't have kids, I do the same in my own life. And really a lot of that gets back to paying attention, which is a topic that will come up every single time we probably talk about storytelling, right? Is how are you paying attention to your own life? How are you excavating the stories that you are living right now? So for me, again, lots of inspiration simply comes from paying attention. And I think that if you look back in previous years when I've done Q&As like this and people have asked those kinds of questions, I'm pretty sure that that was one of my answers before, is that I listen to my life, right? I am looking, I am involved in a way where I am actively paying attention to the stories as they come up. Doesn't mean that I'm always telling the stories right in that moment, but I am someone that goes through my life aware that I am living a story, right? That I am a character in a bigger story, and the people in my house here are all characters in my story because I'm the only one that can tell my story, because I'm the only one that's living this particular story, and that's the same thing for you. Other sources of inspiration for me, I know in years past, magazines was one of the places that I looked for inspiration. A lot of that was design related, right? I liked seeing how designers laid out magazines, oftentimes looking at the foundation for how the magazine pages were put together could be a jumping off point for me telling one of my stories. So that is one place. And then another place where I really do get inspiration is by reading. And I love to read. I'm a big reader. I'm always reading something, if not many things. Most of the time I read one book at a time, but there are sometimes where I'm kind of doing multiples. And actually right now, today, I have, I'm reading a nonfiction, a fiction, and then I'm also listening to a nonfiction. I've started doing that a little bit more using Audible, and I'm listening to a nonfiction book on there, like when I go for a walk or when I'm doing things around the house or when I'm working on work projects too. That's the kind of thing that I like to listen to. So reading for me, it is the exposure to words that gives me inspiration. So even in fiction books, even in the fiction books that I like to read, which happen to be a lot about thrillers and murders and things like that, there's still points in those stories where I am inspired by the words that the author is using, and those will often invite me to tell a different story, right? So I highly, highly believe in that concept of the more you read, the better you write. But also, as with everything, writing is a practice, and the more you do it, the better you get comfortable with your own writing voice. And that is simply practice, which is what I've been doing for years and years. So on that topic of using books as inspiration or jumping off point, I also have a pretty big collection here now of books that are about writing and about storytelling. And I want to highlight 4 of them for you today. This is definitely not the long list. And I think that I have a couple blog posts that have shared some books in the past, so I will try to link that for you guys below. I went just in my bedroom, I have a couple different shelves that are set aside. I see these as resource books, right? They are books that I can pick up, I can dive into, I can read a little bit, I can, sometimes I read them straight through, other times I pick them up and I flip through and there might be a writing prompt, or there might be just a different way to think about storytelling that then launches me into a different kind of story that I could tell in my own life. So let me show you the ones that I picked out today. The first one is called Writing Down Your Soul, and this is by Janet Connor, and it says How to Activate and Listen to the Extraordinary Voice Within. Now this is one of those ones that I pick up and I flip through, and she has lots of different writing prompts that are included in this book. So if you're looking for one that has specific writing prompts, this is a good one. Here's a couple examples, and she's talking about soul questions. So definitely the opportunity to do more personal narrative writing would be within this book. But there's a lot of questions that are in here, like, what's in front of me right now? What do I need to deal with or face? Is there a decision that needs to be made? But then also, what am I really feeling right now? What feeling lies behind that feeling? And behind that feeling, that's an interesting topic, right? The excavation of the top level feelings, and then the next level feelings, and then the next level feelings. But this is one of the ones that I come back to and I pick up and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get something out of it every time I pick it up. So that one's called Writing Down Your Soul. Then one that has long been a inspiration to me is called Take Joy, A Writer's Guide to Loving the Craft. This is by Jane Yolen. And I've had this book, I don't even remember when I bought this book. This is a long-term book in my collection here. Here, a quote in here that I have underlined and marked: stories are around us everywhere like fireflies, and the writer must be ready to grab them as they fly by. Use a net with a very small weave. Ideas are small. What we do with ideas is the large part of the equation. So this one has both inspiration and story ideas also. Another quote in here, the greatest stories touch on the sacred, the moment when head and heart and soul combine. That's something that I have talked about before. I'm always looking for that. That is like the trifecta, right? Head, heart, and soul coming together, and then getting it out of your head and using your hands to get it down. So this one is good. I have so many pages marked. Lots of cool things in this one. I would highly recommend that if you are looking for tips and ideas to enhance your writing, to just learn a little bit more about writing. The kind of writing that we do in memory keeping is really closest to narrative or memoir writing. So any books that are about memoir and or actual memoirs are ones that I highly recommend too. So speaking of that, one of them that I found a couple years ago, I think that this one was, this is one of the more recent ones. This one's called The Memoir Project, a thoroughly non-standardized text for writing and life. I love the non-standardized part, right? Because this is not academic writing that we are doing. So this is another one that I've underlined a ton, read, pick it up at different points in time. Let's see, I'm kind of looking to see if there's one here that I would want to read. Foremost in memoir, we expect your voice. That's the slant, your take on the world. It's what we're looking for when we buy your book, listen to you on the radio, pay for a magazine that features your essay, or read your blog, or I would say, or read your scrapbook page, right? Read that too. This one is really good. Writing memoir is about telling the truth. And so she's just going through lots of different tips related to that. Also, as you read any of these books about memoir writing, they are full of jumping off points for stories that you might want to tell. And then the one that I started reading this morning, if you are in One Little Word this month, my friend Liz Lamoureux has been leading us through a poetry exercise, a writing exercise to help connect us with our words. And she's been reading poems. And one of the poems that she read is by Jo Harjo. And she is actually the poet laureate of the United States, I think the current one. And this is her memoir, and it's called Poet Warrior. And I got it because I was interested in her poetry. But as I probably read like 20 pages, 30 pages this morning. It is her memoir. And I 100% find that reading other people's memoirs is fuel for my own storytelling. It gives me different ways to approach stories that I might want to tell. It shows me that things things don't have to be linear. That even in this book, like she has some really short paragraphs. It's mixed with poetry. It's mixed with longer paragraphs. It's just really, really beautiful. And in this one in particular, it's a lot about Native American history, a lot about connecting with the land and connecting to our stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. So I've started underlining in this one too. I was gonna see if there was any, this one, like I said, this one I just started today, but it's really beautiful and just a great jumping off point. She does a whole thing. Some of you guys have seen me before do a prompt that's around the table. And with that writing, it's a favorite one that I've done a variety of different times, talking about what happens around our dining table or around the other table that we have in our main living area. What are the stories that happen in that space? And really what that is you are using an inanimate object as a vehicle for getting stories told, right? You are using, that is the lens. The table is the lens, and the different stories that I can tell are all the things that happen at the table. And she actually did one that was similar to that. And I thought it was really cool because the way that she did it was a more universal table. And versus like the way that I tell those stories is very personal, right? Very much related to my own family and the people that sit at my table. But I wanted to read, I'm gonna end this video today by reading you guys this little bit that's in this book again, Poet Warrior. Any memoirs you can get your hand on, I think, are super valuable in terms of seeing the way that other people tell their stories, right? And the way that other people write their stories. So this today, like when I was reading this morning, this is totally inspiring me and filling me up in the ways that I need to be filled up to push me forward in my own writing, my own storytelling and memory keeping. All right, so this one says, perhaps the world ends here. This again is about the table idea, right? The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table we gossip, recall enemies, and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves and as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table we sing with joy, with sorrow, we pray of suffering and remorse, we give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. So when I have done around the table, I often will use the phrase, around the table, this and this and this is happening, right? And I use those 3 words as the jumping off point to invite the story. And I repeat those again and again. And one of the things that I liked about this writing from her, and this was just one section in the book, right? There's other parts that are full paragraphs, there are other parts that are shorter poems. But I like that she didn't use repetition as a method of pulling out her story. What she did more was really look for visual descriptions, right? Like the chasing the chickens and the dogs away from it, or babies teething at the corner. She said, it is here. She also said, at this table, wars have begun and ended at this table. We have given birth on this table. So it's really like at this table, on this table, but around the table would work well also. All right, so those are a couple different books if you're looking for some writing inspiration. Like I said, I have a whole bunch more. Just wanted to hit on a few of them for you guys today. Remember to look in your own life for inspiration. We can look online. There's lots of great inspiration online. Lots of people like me that have been sharing story ideas for years and years. My one main caveat to that is don't get lost in other people's stories. It's really easy to get lost in other people's ideas, get lost in other people's stories, and then run out of time for actually telling your own stories. And what I want to encourage you to do is really be mindful of that and make sure that you are getting your own stories told, as well as being inspired by others. So make time. All right, we'll see you guys back here again soon for another Storytime episode.